At this time of national emergency, faced with pandemic coronavirus, the worst possible people are in charge at the worst possible time. Boris Johnson in the UK, with his Health Secretary Matthew Hancock, Home Secretary Priti Patel, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. Trump in the US, with his government entirely composed of corporate cronies. Scott Morrison in Australia, the man who waved around a lump of coal in the Australian Parliament saying, hey guys, there's nothing to worry about, all this science malarkey is complete junk. These are extremely dangerous people who have made a career out of denying the realities of public health and environmental science. They are now in charge at the worst possible time. It's no coincidence that the three rich nations which seem to be failing most catastrophically on this virus are the three nations whose governments have arisen out of a 50-year campaign to destroy public health and environmental protection. Billions of dollars have been poured into politics to ensure that the dirtiest companies get their way. And we've seen the infrastructure of persuasion, whose purpose was to rip down public protections, become the government in the UK, in the US, and in Australia. And you look at the UK government, for example, number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's office, is now stuffed with people straight out of that infrastructure of persuasion. You've got Chloe Wesley from the Taxpayers Alliance in number 10 Downing Street. You've got Munira Mirza from the Manifesto Club, part of this weird network of people just attacking all public protections. She's there in the number 10 policy unit. And of course you've got Dominic Cummings, who was selected to be the head of Vote Leave by Matthew Elliott, the man who founded the Taxpayers Alliance. When Boris Johnson first formed a government in this country, the Institute of Economic Affairs, sort of founder member of this dirty money deregulatory alliance of think tanks and lobby groups, boasted that 14 of his front benchers were alumni of its own initiatives. So people like Dominic Raab, Matthew Hancock, the Health Secretary, they were all to an extent schooled and groomed by the Institute of Economic Affairs. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, she used to work as a tobacco lobbyist. No concern at all for public health, no concern for the interests of other people, just concern for making money. In the US, the denier-in-chief is president. This is a man who has dismissed anything that interferes with profit-making and has just tried to shout down scientists, dismiss the warnings of experts for many, many years. He called climate science a Chinese hoax. He's now calling the virus a Chinese virus. In Australia, Scott Morrison, who has been at war with climate scientists, completely ignored or dismissed public crises in the past. Remember, he was on holiday in Hawaii while the great fires were raging across Australia.
How come we only had 4 trucks to defend our town? Because our town doesn't have a lot of money, but we have hearts of gold, Mr. Prime Minister.
No, you're an idiot, mate.
And now he, as Prime Minister, is the person in charge of dealing with this horrendous pandemic. There's a lot of exotic theories about why the governments of the UK, the US and Australia are so phenomenally inept when it comes to tackling coronavirus. Why did they start so late? Why did they entertain crazy ideas like creating herd immunity? Are they actually trying to kill us? Is this some form of culling? Do they think the country's overpopulated? Are they trying to solve the pensions crisis by killing off all the old people? You know, you can sometimes be forgiven for thinking those things because they've been so phenomenally incompetent. But what's actually happening is that we've got people in charge whose whole mindset is in the wrong place. Their entire mindset is about just kicking everything into the long grass and saying, you know, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it, the market will sort it out. These are people completely embedded in the neoliberal philosophy, which says that government should not govern. You should leave it all to this magical thing called the market, which will wave its invisible hand and everything will get sorted out. By the market, of course, what they really mean is very rich people. Leave them alone and they'll sort it out somehow. But of course that magic doesn't actually work. But that's the magic they believe in. That's the magical thinking which informs every part of their being. You don't need any great exotic theory to explain the total uselessness of these governments. They are useless by design. The self-hating state has been tearing chunks off itself for decades now, ripping the National Health Service apart. In the US, ensuring that there is not a decent universal healthcare system in order to enable the private health companies and the insurers and the rest of it to make an absolute fortune out of other people's suffering. This is what they've been doing now for years and years. And this is what they tried to continue doing when the pandemic hit. Money was made more important than human life. That's the fundamental problem that we face again and again. And this virus is one instance of that, but we're going to see a lot more. There's a lot of projections now showing that with 2 degrees or so of global heating, farming will collapse in many of the world's breadbaskets. We could see multiple breadbasket failures and an absolute shortage of food. And if you think people fighting over toilet paper looks bad, wait till they're fighting over food. We have to move very, very fast on this to stop that disaster from happening. And coronavirus should be a warning that our current system is not fit for purpose. We need a new political and economic system. We need a system that puts life above money, that values human life and the lives of all the other species with which we share this world above the profit-seeking motives of corporations and billionaires. At times like this, we all need to be as well informed as we possibly can. We need as many possible viewpoints, which we aren't going to get through the mainstream media, which we often see just repeating government lines, even when they are patently false. Please, if you possibly can, support Double Down News through Patreon. It's one of the few things which stands between us and disaster.